Okay. It was March 1938, a crisp early spring morning, and with the sun glinting off the soldiers' helmets as they goose-stepped down the Unter den Linden. I'm so sorry, that's the wrong thing. I don't know how that got there. Okay, so we'll begin with which, sorry, I'm being very stupid. Which one to press on?
The right one should make you go forwards, yeah? No?
Sorry, I just need to squeeze through you to turn the music down.
Right. Which one?
It should be that one. If it's not working, I'll need to look into it.
I'll have to know.
There you go. Thank
That button over there on the right. There's the second one down here.
The top hats. No one can be entirely certain when top hats began to appear, who created the first one, or where he got the idea from. But it was a clear departure from the traditional tricorns and bicorns that were regularly worn by the gentry. A reasonably strong case can be made for George Dunnage and his partner Thomas Larkin, who claimed to have created a tall hat in 1793. The pair obtained a patent for it the following year, and documents exist that show their company in London supplied the third Earl of Egremont with a waterproof silk hat, possibly for his coachman. Tall hats of a similar type quickly gained wide acceptability and acquired a variety of nicknames: stovepipe, plug hat and chimney pot, but no one called them top hats before the 1850s. Before this date, the self-styled leader of fashion, Beau Brummell, and his dandy friends all wore them, often in extravagant colours. The notoriously eccentric, the 5th Duke of Portland, favoured a version nearly 2 feet tall. The top hat began to be worn by all classes, and ceased to be a common fashion item by the mid-19th century. But it was the default choice for the professionals and upper classes, especially in town. In 1908, a Tory MP resigned from his Jew club in embarrassment after turning up for his first visit in a Panama, only to find all the other members wearing top hats. But by the 1920s, top hat sales declined as the appearance of softer, more informal hats took hold. They were preferred as morning suits gave way to city pinstripes, and the rot well and truly set in by the start of the Second World War. Now, here's a gentleman wearing a fine silk hat, top hat. Nobody recognises him now. No. Von Ribbentrop, yes, that's right. He was the German ambassador to London, and famously or infamously had an affair with the Duchess of Windsor, or so it's said. I'm not convinced actually. The top hat continued to be a conventional but part of diplomatic dress, and here are the Japanese government delegation on the USS Missouri when they signed the surrender to the US Armed Forces on 2nd of September 1945. So it was very much still part of diplomatic dress. They were worn by the government's broker. The government broker, there were 2 of them actually, but the Mullen and Co were the more famous. Well, not really the more famous, but anyway, there was another company. And here you see, this is probably in the 1980s. These are the government brokers who sold gilts on the market. Now, they wore top hats so that the market, the floor, because everything was done on the floor of the stock exchange, that they would be instantly recognisable, so that the brokers would know the government was selling bonds or whatever when they saw these brokers appearing on the market. That was really until the mid-1980s. And in the House of Commons, it was the case that to raise a point of order, i.e. during a debate, as you still see them doing in the House, they had to put on a top hat. Now, it was a collapsible one that was kept in the House. This, I'm not sure the date, that is Tony Newton, who was the leader of the House for the Conservatives, probably late 1980s, I suspect, because it was abolished in 1998 as it was seen as ridiculous when Parliament was being televised, so that's why they stopped it. And elsewhere, top hats became a rarity. Eton College abandoned them in the 1940s, and at Harrow, only monitors or prefects wear them, and then only occasionally. Now, the rot really set in when John F. Kennedy became the first US president not to wear one at his inauguration on 20th of January 1961. Now, he did take a hat, as you can see, to the inauguration, but he didn't wear it. Here is the actual ceremony. He didn't wear. He was the first US president not to wear one, and I don't think it's ever been worn since. The royal family wears them more than most, and the Duke of Edinburgh is said to have ordered one fitted with a small radio so that he could listen to Test Match Special whilst at Royal Ascot. Now, where to wear them? Royal Ascot is obviously the place to be seen wearing a top hat, especially in the royal enclosure. The debate is ongoing whether to wear black or grey, which is technically known as white, which was introduced by James Locke III in the 19th century. And this is Jock Dales Broughton on the right, wearing what is known as a white top hat by Locke's. He famously was charged with the murder. I did actually do a talk on Lord Error. He was charged with the murder. He was acquitted but committed suicide when he returned to Liverpool. Black has certainly gained the upper hand in recent years, and silk is the most esteemed covering. However, these are no longer made, as you may well know, as the French factory that made them closed in 1968 due to the brothers who owned it near Lyon, Nicholas and Bobby Smith. I think they were English, actually. They fell out over Nicholas being disinherited from his father's estates, and the whole process of spinning the silk and weaving it has been lost. So you won't ever find a new silk. If anybody tries to sell you a brand new silk hat, it just doesn't exist. You can, of course, buy silk hats made prior to '68, and if you've got a smaller head, you're probably in luck, because people's heads, like everything, have grown over the years.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. So I don't care. So, as I said, and they can range from anything from £500 to 15,000. Lock & Co will sell you a black felt top hat from about 625, and an Ascot or white top hat at £595. Other than Royal Ascot and the Derby, top hats can be worn at traditional weddings with a formal morning dress code, but these really are very few and far between. You won't see many, if any, society weddings with people wearing top hats. It's very much old hat, as they say. And they can also be worn for very formal evening white tie events like an opera ball. The Homburg. The origin of the Homburg was as a stiffened felt German hunting hat from the 19th century. The hat first appeared in Britain in August 1882, when the then Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII, wore one on his return from a trip to the German spa town Bad Homburg, from which the hat takes its name, where the English upper classes like to take water. They also like to take the opportunity to gamble, which was illegal in Britain at the time. So British visitors ate the Prince's Star by buying similar hats at the town's Mockle factory in 1920. There was a factory at Mockle, I'm not quite sure where that is. In 1923, the inimitable Jeeves, Bertie Wooster, tells Jeeves, "Then bring me my wangy cane, my yellowish shoes, and my old green Homburg." However, the factory was in trouble and had closed in 1931, but Homburgs still remained highly fashionable. None more so in the night. So that's the king wearing, I think, probably a grey or brown, perhaps taupe Hamburg. I mean, they are predominantly sold in black, but you can still get them in all sorts. I think, Clayton, you have a...
I have a grey one and a brown.
There you are. None more so than in the 1930s, being worn by the Foreign Secretary, Anthony Eden. Here he is. Usually in black felt with a silk brim, it is still referred to as an Anthony Eden or just an Eden. It was particularly fashionable amongst fellow politicians, including Neville Chamberlain and Winston Churchill. Eden was a popular figure, at least until his resignation as Prime Minister following the Suez Crisis in 1956, and as a young Foreign Secretary, aged only 38, which was very young in those days to have hold high office. He cut a dashing figure. Chips Channon, who I have done talks on before, dubbed him as one of the glamour boys. Although they went out of fashion in the 1960s, they were worn by Dwight D. Eisenhower at both his presidential inaugurations in 1953 and 57, and Konrad Adenauer, the German West Chancellor, also wore them. However, Tony Hancock wore them to a more comical effect in his eponymous comedy show, Hancock's Half Hour, in the 1950s and 1960s. By that time it really was on the wane.
Quite dramatic shape one as well.
Yes, you can get them. I mean, that looks like a very old style one.
Yes.
The Homburg is a formal hat, so it can be worn at black tie evening events and weddings. It can also dignify dark suits. Homburgers are usually black, as we discussed, but they can be found in various colours, from grey, navy, blue, camel, fawn, and even maroon. They are an ideal hat for black tie evening wear. I will just have to take a drink. Excuse me. The bowler hat. That's a Lock and Co. All the hats I've shown are from Lock and Co. Mainly because I've used them because they do all the traditional hats, and as you will find out, Lock and Co. have a very long-standing connection with the bowler hat. The bowler hat origins can be traced precisely to 29th of August 1849, when a customer called in at James Lock and Co. St James's, which is where the shop is still today, and still owned by the same family, hoping to obtain some new hats for the keepers on the Earl of Leicester's Holcombe Hall estate. The customer was the Honourable Edward Cook. Now, I often pronounce it Coke, but it is pronounced Cook, so I will use the correct term, Cook, the second Earl's younger brother. He wished to replace the men who worked on the estate's top hats, which were frequently being knocked off and damaged. He wished to replace them with tough, close-fitting hats, which protected their heads from low-hanging branches when out riding, and from poachers' sticks and clubs when on foot. Because, you found all sorts of ne'er-do-wells on the estates at that time. Locke quickly had a prototype constructed by the company's chief hat maker, Thomas Bowler, from whence the name has stuck, at his factory in Southwark. Cook approved of the hat's pleasing appearance and strength, stomping on it for good measure, and placed an order for the hat. The hat quickly caught on with other estates like the Duke of Westminster's at Eaton Hall in Cheshire. Today, each of the 8 members, and these are the Holcombe Hall keepers, they each are presented with a new hat a new cook, I should say, after 1 year's service. And at Locks, they continue to call them cooks in honour of the original buyer. However, the term bowler has enjoyed far greater prominence, especially since the fashion for them was spread from England's country estates to the capital city. That's the gentleman, fox hunter there, wearing the bowler, which is where you'll still see it today. By the end of the 1800s, the bowler had left its country roots and established itself as an essential item for civil service and stockbrokers in the city, together with an unfurled umbrella, I should say. That's I'm not sure when that was taken, probably sometime in the 60s, possibly 70s. The bowler gradually faded from use in the city by the 1990s. The Metropolitan Line train scrapped hat racks and umbrella hooks in 2013, but bowlers and umbrellas are still the order of the day on Cavalry Sunday. You can tell that's an old photo there because forward to the Tories doesn't really work at the moment. And these are the Guards officers who still parade on, they parade on Cavalry Sunday in Hyde Park. This is London's annual combined Cavalry Old Comrades Day Association parade for the fallen. Serving officers are also expected to wear suits and hats when they're in town on duty, and so Lock & Co still sell 4,000 to 5,000 annually.
5,000?
Apparently so.
I've seen another.
The retired officer John Steed, played by Patrick Macnee in the ITV series The Avengers, kept up the appeal of the bowler for the man about town in the 1960s. But as I say, it was really sort of the high point of the bowler in Britain. In the US, the bowler was known, or is known, as the derby, and had more working class origins, being worn by railway workers and cowboys, and most famously by the British comic actor Charlie Chaplin as the Little Tramp, which Chaplin portrayed in Hollywood films from 1914 to 1936. Where to wear it? The bowler is a semi-formal hat and can be worn with a dark suit or a blazer and dark trousers, but is rarely seen today. It's more usually worn by stewards at country pursuit fairs, horse racing such as Royal Ascot, and of course at the Chap Olympia.
Neil, do you know why it's called a derby or derby?
I could have found out, I didn't go into it. Probably because it was worn at horse racing, I'm not sure. Probably. The trilby, and this again is a Lock & Co trilby. It's
To go back to the derby, do you think the derby had a slightly different shape with a more curl on the brim?
Yes, definitely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are various, it's like all hats, there's no one definitive style. The Trilby, the publication 1894, the novel Trilby, was a phenomenal success for the author George du Maurier. Today its plot is largely forgotten, but the book is famously remembered for the introduction of the female heroine Svengali, today a byword for a highly manipulative character. The actor manager Herbert Beerbohm Tree, who took the role of Svengali, I mean it was a female part, when he took the play of the book to London's Haymarket in 1895, so it was only a year later, which made the heroine's headgear a felt hat a leading fashion item. It's similar in style to the fedora, I'll go on to the fedora, but it has a smaller, shorter and slightly sharper crown with a narrow brim. The hat became a more relaxed choice away from the formality of the hot top hat and was particularly favoured by bohemians such as the writers and artists of the Bloomsbury Group. The poet and painter Isaac Rosenberg, this is him in a self-portrait, wore one for two self-portraits that hang today, one in the Tate Britain and the other in the National Portrait Gallery. By the 1930s, the trilby had moved upmarket, and brown felts in particular became firm favourites with the horse racing community amongst owners and trainers. And here we have the aforementioned Sir Stockdale's Broughton here wearing a trilby at the races. That's probably in the 1930s, before he left for Kenya. That is the racehorse trainer, John Godston, who's very well known on the flat circuit with a typical racing felt. They became popular in British films in the 1940s and 1950s, being worn by men about town, but also by crooks and Scotland Yard detectives in equal measure. This is gentleman. I'm not sure who this gentleman is, but he's wearing a particularly fine.
The Fuhrers were beaver fur.
Yeah, a particularly fine beaver fur.
Jesus Christ.
Here's another gentleman who's adorned his trilby with a. Okay, that's the last of the Nazis, I promise. They were particularly probably, say, by 90 by crooks. This is Pinky. What was his name? What was his surname? Pinky. I forget his anyway. Pinky in Brighton Rock. He was a very sort of punkish sort of hoodlum who rather fancied himself. And this is a scene from Fabian of the Yard, one of several sort of Scotland Yard detectives who were popular in the 1950s. That's Fabian of the Yard on the right. And then they were still reasonably popular in the mid-60s when James Bond wore one played by Sean Connery in, this one was in From Russia With Love, but he also wore it in Dr. No, I'm not sure whether he wore it in Goldfinger. So, but it was really sort of dying out by the late 60s. The trilby is a semi-formal hat that can be worn with a suit or a blazer, sports jacket and trousers. Traditionally made from wool felt, the very best ones are made with rabbit fur, and strictly speaking, a brown trilby should be worn out of town, in particular the races, and a grey or black trilby should be worn in town. A black trilby is particularly best suited to black tie evening wear. The fedora. The fedora, this is again a James Lock & Co. fedora. The fedora took its name from a play, again, Fedora, it's all very original this, by the French playwright Victorien Sardou. This was written for the famous stage artist Sarah Bernhardt and was first performed in the United States by her in 1882. It tells the story of the cross-dressing Princess Fedora, Romazon, and was later turned into an opera. Numerous film adaptations followed, and the style of hat she wore caught on immediately by both sexes. It was worn as a symbol of the women's rights movement, but the movie soon associated it with prohibition gangsters like Al Capone here, and it was worn by leading film stars of the day. This is bunch of gentlemen in the 30s wearing fedoras.
How does the fedora differ from the turban then?
Well, it's got a wider brim,
Wider brim.
essentially. And it's well, I did explain it briefly, but I can't remember what I said now. We'll go back to it. Yeah, I can go back over that. Anyway, so, and it was worn by, because of Prohibition, we then had the onset of gangster films in Hollywood, and James Cagney was one of the famous protagonists, plus also George Raft. So the fedora is very much associated with, how should we say, not particularly
Rough types.
likeable sort of people.
Bricks.
But perhaps the most famous fedora wearer was Humphrey Bogart, seen here wearing it with his traditional aquascutum raincoat, most famously worn in his, well, undoubtedly his most famous film, Casablanca. The fedora is a mainstay of suspense movies through the 50s, being worn by the stars of film noir like Robert Mitchum. It's always been regarded as a rather flamboyant hat, and as such in Britain it was first worn in 1883 by Oscar Wilde, who purchased a black fedora for a year-long speaking tour in the USA. Fedoras only took off in Britain in the 1920s when the Prince of Wales wore one, but generally the trilby was more preferred. The fedora lends itself to more exotic materials of hat wearing, ranging from wool, cashmere, rabbit and beaver felt to mink, mohair and even chinchilla. It also lends itself to flamboyant colours such as green, blue and maroon. The fedora, like the trilby, fell out of fashion by the 1960s, but was given a boost in the 1980s with Indiana Jones when he wore the famous brown hat, which was created for the films by Herbert Johnson, a well-respected firm of hat makers who still exists today, but within a different framework. And it was known as the Poets, and they, as I say, they still produce it today, and they do you can have it in, I think they produce about 8, possibly 10 different versions of it.
Tom Baker wear one as Doctor Who.
I think he did, yes. I think he did, yeah.
Yeah, a bit much broader brim.
Myself not being a
I don't
huge...
necessarily that one.
Where to wear it? The fedora's been, there's never been a formal hat as such, and is best suited to more flamboyant personalities who wish to cut a dash. If worn in black or grey, it can be worn with dark day suits and at a stretch with black tie, evening wear, but it's probably better suited to more casual wear with a blazer, button-down shirt and chinos, preferably in deep brown. And I will have to take another drink, otherwise I shall expire.
That's gin in there.
Yes, not sure gin would be the best. The boater. This again is a lock and code boater. And I've previously given a talk on the boater at the New Sheridan Club, so I won't delve into too much detail here. Suffice to say that its origins are a subject of debate, but are probably derived from either French sailors' hats from the 19th century or those of Venetian gondoliers. It became popular in Britain from the 1880s, particularly amongst public schools like Harrow, who still wear them today, and they wear their own particular version with a very low crown and quite a wide brim. And Eden still wear them, but only on Founders' Day, the 4th of June. The boat is made of Sennick straw, which is, coiled and then moulded into a flattened pillbox shape with a wide, flat brim. The boater is always regarded as a summer hat, in Britain for sporting occasions such as boating, and particularly, well, this is the Surrey County Cricket Club from 1898. You can see it's quite a popular hat. Apart from the traditional cricket cap, you know, a lot of them are wearing boaters. So it was popular towards the end of the 19th century. This is how it tells you how popular it was in Britain. This is a hat factory in Luton I mean, they used to produce thousands and thousands, and it's all sadly now gone. As I say, the boater was worn at Henley Royal Regatta generally I would say, it was still worn at Henley, but from the 1930s, the boater gave way to the more practical Panama hat. But essentially, if you get a boater wet, you will ruin it, and it's far easier to damage than a Panama. In the USA, they were seen more of a summer business hat, and this is a shot from, I think, 1921. You can see just about everybody is wearing a boater, and it was popular on Wall Street and also used by the FBI. Now, they were typically worn, and there is no particular season here to wear it, or no defined season. The chairman and I have debated this many times, but generally speaking, the Americans regard Straw Hat Day from mid-May until Felt Hat Day, which is mid-September. And I think I mentioned in the talk about the boater, there was Felt Hat Day riots when, you know, people would knock the hats off people who wore them beyond September, and somebody was actually killed in one of these riots. So they took it very seriously over them.
Rightly so.
As men's fashion became less formal in the 1930s, the boater gave way, as I say, to the softer and more practical Panama hat, and the boater never regained its popularity, but it's still worn in the USA by barbershop quartets and school and university bands. As I say, less so here. You hardly see one at Henley now. I think the chairman will back me up on that. The hat became popular with actors and musical athletes, musical artists like, that's three gentlemen in the 30s wearing boaters, looking very stylish. There's Fred Astaire wearing a boater. Charles Chevalier, a very popular music hall artist. And then a lot of your people won't probably know this chap, but Frankie Vaughan was very popular in the 1960s on television and variety shows, which is where the boater resided. Where to wear it? The boater is a semi-formal hat and can be worn either with a suit or a blazer and trousers at boating events, although it is less likely to be seen, as I say, either at Henley or Cowes these days. But it's still a perfect hat for a summer picnic. The Panama, now there are various sizes and shapes of Panamas. This is just the standard Lock & Co. Panama. The Panama hat is famously not from Panama, but is made in Ecuador. Theodore Roosevelt, the US president, made it famous by visiting the construction site of the Panama Canal and wearing one. Here he is, holding his Panama. And I'd say it's not, but it was actually worn much earlier than that in the United States. The hat had been woven and worn in Ecuador's coastal provinces of Guado and Manasi for centuries. They were made piecemeal until a Spaniard called Alfaro E. Gonzalez built a factory to produce them, to export to the States, and sold them to supply thousands of gold miners and prospectors in the great gold rush in the 1850s. And they've been a popular Ecuador export ever since. In Britain, King Edward VII popularised the hat when he wore it to Goodwood races in 1906, together with a linen suit instead of the traditional top hat and morning suit. It then became fashionable amongst his entourage, and the Panama hat and linen suit has become the de facto uniform for the late summer race meeting at Goodwood, known as Glorious Goodwood. The Panama became the traditional summer hat in Britain in the 1930s after the wane of the bow term, after the First World War. It became more popular still as it was seen being worn by colonials in British films of the period and in the United States as well. The Panama is as popular today as it's ever been, but these are, and there are many variations ranging from the cheap lookalikes to the very expensive traditionally made. The hat is made from weaving a shredded and dried taquida straw into a hat form, which is a meticulous process of weaving the crown and adding the brim, and then back weaving to finish the brim's edge. After weaving, the hat is softened, washed, and hand ironed in shape before being dried and trimmed. Now, the very best Panamas are still made in Ecuador and can range in price from a couple of £100 to several thousands. The price is very much dependent on how fine the weave is. I mean, if it's the Monte Cristo is known as the best Panama you can get, but even then you have degrees of the fineness of the weave, and they're the sort of hats that you see them pulled through a ring, and they can be rolled up and put in your suitcase and still retain their shape when you take them out. Where to wear them? There's President Roosevelt wearing one. It's Charlie Chan, the famous detective in the 1930s. It was seen. I mean, you can watch any 30s film and it will be there. There's Rhett Butler wearing one in Gone with the Wind. The Panama is the very versatile hat. It can be worn with casual wear or a suit or blazer, but is not regarded as a hat for very formal occasions. It's only to be worn in the summer months and is not a hat for wet conditions, as it can easily lose its shape. The Panama can be worn in various styles: a trilby, a fedora, and a planter style. It's traditionally worn in Britain with a black band, so the same as the boater, which was born out of a marked respect for the deaths of Queen Victoria in 1901 and King Edward VII in 1910. Some more ostentatious wearers like to wear them in club colours, although that is generally frowned upon in more respectable circles.
I'm not coming in next month.
The flat cap has proved as appealing to the working class as it has to lovers of field sports and country wear. It owes much of its success to a 1571 Act of Parliament where anyone over the age of 6 was required to wear a woven hat on Saturdays and religious holidays. Yeah. The Cabas Act of 1488 prior to that had made it illegal for English subjects to wear ones made abroad on pain of a large fine, although this didn't extend to maids, ladies, gentlewomen, noble personalities, and every lord, knight, and gentleman. So it was very, very particular about who would be liable to be fined. The object of the laws was to protect the British wool trade, which was essential to the medieval economy. And my forebear, the second Earl of Essex, boasted 6 beaver hats from Canada, 10 of velvet, and a further 5 of taffeta. Yes, we don't like to talk about it. The law faded out. It proved to be difficult to enforce, though, and it was redeemed or reversed by the end of the century. But the habit of wearing wool hats had taken on, has become well established, as was the habit of wearing a flat cap, usually from tweed or corduroy, which was generally worn by working men. That's another. So I should say these are Bates and Co. I'll go on to Bates, but they have a very fine selection of caps, more so I find than locks, and this is just a couple of them. This is more of a. So that's more of a flat cap, where the material is pulled over to the brim, and that is what you call either a baker boy or a newsboy or a Gatsby cap, where the material is 8 pieces.
Motoring.
Right?
Motoring.
Well, whatever, you can call it what you want. So here we are, we see, this is probably in the early part of the 20th century, and you can see everybody, well, there are 1 or 2 bowlers there, but virtually everybody's wearing a flat cap. So I just mentioned the newsboy and the baker boy cap is a firmer, more voluminous style made from 8 triangular panes of fabric which meet at a central post and are covered by a cloth-covered button. The body of the cap is pulled over to the brim. The duckbill cap has a sloping triangular profile that gives it a pointed duck's beak shape, and the ascot cap has a distinct, more shape of a single piece construction with a round flat crown and low profile. So I mean there are many types of flat caps you can buy and wear. Caps are made from all types of material suitable for conditions, whether it's summer or winter, from Harris tree to mohair to leather and linen. Where to wear it? The flat cap is a casual hat and can be worn with any smart casual and casual wear, from a t-shirt to a jacket and jeans. For the country, it is worn more as a practical cap for field sports, especially shooting, and for general walking and hiking. It is not appropriate to wear it at formal occasions with a suit. This character, I think I did forget to mention here. This was a chap called Andy Cap, who was from the Daily Mirror. He was, I missed that whole section there. Sorry. I should go back a bit. By the mid-20th century, it had become firmly associated with the lazy and the feckless, as worn by Andy Cap. He was a character created in the Daily Mirror cartoon character, which ran from the 1950s, I think, to the 60s. And he was firmly associated with the North as a grim, grey place. The cap has crossed class lines during the Edwardian period and was famously worn by the then Prince of Wales in the 1920s. It became popular with landed gentry on their estates and remains popular as a country hat today. Now, the BB series Peaky Blinders, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, which ran from 2013 to 2022, featuring a crime gang based in Birmingham after the First World War, with Cillian Murphy in the lead role, firmly established the flat cap as a fashion item for men, as it still is pretty much today. A Peaky Blinders website was established that sells various versions of the newsboy cap worn here by the leading protagonist of the series. As I say, I did mention there are various types of flat caps. I won't go through that again. Now, hats not to wear. Now, I don't know if Mr. Myhill is here, is he? He's not here tonight. Stephen Myhill. I know he wears a beret and he wears it quite well, but
I've tried it and it doesn't work.
yeah, well, that's what I think. The beret is a difficult look to carry off. Firstly, it's French and has a distinct. emanating from the Basque Country and has a distinct whiff of an onion cellar about it. Favoured by artists and intellectuals, it is also associated with British situation comedy from 1970s and 1980s, from Hello, Hello to the hapless Frank Spencer, seen here from Some Mothers Do Have 'Em.
And Citizen Smith.
I could have mentioned Citizen Smith.
Not be very pronounced.
The baseball cap. With its origins in mid-19th century baseball, the cap was firm. You obviously read my script. The cap was firmly established itself in Britain as the ubiquitous headwear for teenagers through to pensioners. As such, it is a hat to avoid. It was widely reviled in 1987 when the then Conservative Party leader, William Hague, wore it together with all his aides with the word Hague emblazoned on it. This, so was it? I thought 97, beg your pardon, 1997, correct. Hayes, and is the most preposterous hat for anyone to wear over the age of 20.
Is that Albert Steptoe behind him?
The beanie hat, almost as ubiquitous as the baseball cap is the beanie. It has medieval origins from the 15th century Monmouth cap. Again, it was worn by poets and artists in the 1960s and 70s. It was ordered as a hat worn by blue-collar workers. It's mostly worn by younger men today, but it's best worn by those who wear a high-vis jacket and carry a shovel.
Unless you wear it in World War II commando style.
Well,
it's
yes.
a no. It's a definite no.
Yes.
You see them on skiers, sometimes the old French one with a big sort of, it's like a nipple that's had the clamp left on too long, and the over the top, that's a no. Get this off at
More about Bobby than
Where to buy hats? Lock & Co is the world's oldest hat shop, founded in 1676 and still run by the Lock family at 6 St James's Street, SW1, where it resides today. This is the original shop. It hasn't changed in all those years. They supply hats to Admiral Lord Nelson, to Winston Churchill, Oscar Wilde and Beau Brummel, amongst many others. It is expensive, but I found it to be a very friendly shop where the staff will assist you in finding the right hat for you, and more importantly, in the correct size. I did say it was expensive. Bates hats, founded by Edward Bates in 1898 on Sloane Street, it soon relocated to Jermyn Street. It was bought by the shirt makers Hilditch and Key when the original Bates shop had to close for redevelopment of the area in 2012. It is now situated within Hilditch and Key at 73 Jermyn Street. We are still greeted by Binks the Cat, who walked into the shop as a kitten in 1921 and stayed there until his death in 1927. He was preserved by a taxidermist and resides in a glass case wearing a top hat. He also used to have a cigar, but I think they've taken that off. Like Locks, Bates is expensive, but they do maintain an extensive, as I mentioned earlier, extensive range of caps suitable for both summer and winter wear. Christie's. Founded by Miller Christie in London in 1773, it supplies hat to royalty and many famous customers. In the 1850s, Prince Albert wore a Christie's top hat, which helped to popularise it amongst the gentry of the day. It closed its Stockport factory in the 1990s and moved production to Witney in Oxfordshire. Christie supplies many online stores and supplies retail partners like John Lewis, whilst maintaining a store at 23 St Christopher's Place, West 1. Its hats are reasonably priced in comparison to Locks and Bates. Other hat stores, Swain of Bond Street owned the famous hat brand Herbert Johnson, aforementioned for producing the pirate hat for the Indiana Jones movies. The brand was founded by Herbert Lewis Johnson, a skilled hat maker who received a royal warrant from King Edward VII after he expertly repaired his top hat. Situated originally in Bond Street, it is famous also for its military headwear, which I think it still produces, and today for various versions of the pirate hat for the Indiana Jones series of films. The bowler hat worn by Steed in the Avengers was a Herbert Johnson design. It suffered several ownership changes in the 1980s and 90s, but was acquired by Swain Alien Brig in 1996, and since 2017 its hats have been handcrafted in a London factory. Oliver Brown are a menswear fashion house founded in Lower Sloane Street in 2000, and the owner, Christian Robinson, has carved a niche in supplying antique silk top hats and claims to have the world's largest collection. It also supplies its own brand, wool felt top hats, and it has various stores throughout London now, including Jermyn Street. Laird Hatters, established in 2009, Laird has 4 stores in central London. They make their own hats and caps and are now reasonably priced, in line with Christie's. Hat etiquette. Men should remove hats when indoors, specifically in homes, restaurants and places of worship. As a sign of respect, they should be removed when a funeral cortege passes by. They should also be removed during a formal event like a flag raising ceremony, a memorial service, and when the national anthem is played. It is not necessary to remove your hat in public spaces such as on trains and buses, or in thoroughfare spaces such as hotel lobbies and airports, although it is appropriate to remove it in a lift if a lady enters. And readers of the Chat magazine will be familiar with the act of hat doffing. It has its origins with medieval knights who removed their helmets or lifted their visors, signifying trust and friendly intent to a fellow knight. Today it is etiquette to doff one's hat when greeting a lady one knows, or removing it if one stops to converse. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that.
Any questions?
Yeah.
He needed more Nazis.
There was back in, I think up until about the 80s, there was quite an association between the bowler hat and American.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that because he was saying something.
I was saying back in, up until the 80s, I think there was quite an association between the boater and American political conferences and rallies. You see that with parties on both sides. I'm wondering, did you discover anything that made sense of that link, or is it just?
Well, I think the boater has, as I said before, in the States, it's got more of a business association. And I mean, in Britain, it's more of just a summer hat. I mean, although you will find photos of city workers wearing it in 1920s, I'm sure, But as you say, I'm not sure whether they still wear at conventions. They used to, didn't they?
They do.
It's died out.
If I interject, when I was in Washington, I saw a collection of these convention hats, and I was shocked to discover they are moulded foam in the shape of a straw hat.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
They've
mean,
been replaced for the baseball cap on one side.
yeah, but as I mentioned, I mean, still in the States, they're worn by barbershop bands and and they're worn by university, as I mentioned, parade. So they've still got a very firm connection with the States, much more so here now. I mean, nobody wears them. I mean, you can go online and you'll find these comical boater hats that for fancy dress. I mean, there are boater hats like every other hat. There's boater hats and boater hats. You're going to have to pay. I mean, you used to be able to buy this Molney for about £50. Sadly, Olney went bust during the lockdown.
are the people who make them. I came across them in Lisbon, and Stetson make things that look as if they are about as close as it gets, and I'm a very particular man.
If I may interject, are you aware of Gamble and Gunn?
Yes.
Who are in Plymouth. I've been talking to them, and they swear, because they couldn't buy the original machines from Olney, they swear they've made their own. And they
I've seen them advertised recently.
I actually did have a Gamble and Gun boat. I just found it a bit shallow on the.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. What could have been, eh?
Anyway, there are, you know, I thought Olney would be the death of the boater hat here, but actually, Lock and Co. do their own one. You can, I mean, the chairman's very funny about Lock and Co. I don't know where they source them, but they are available, generally available now. But you are going to have to pay 200, 250, and it is worth paying because it's not a hat you're going to wear very often. And the alternatives are just, you know, they're just not worth buying. I mean, I've seen these.
In the next issue of the Vintage Review, there'll be an article about a young man in Luton, from Luton, that has gone around and bought and has been, in fact, they've mostly donated them, the old machines and locking presses and so forth. And the idea is they're going to start making boaters there again, possibly some of the fineries, because
I understood Olney had kept the machinery because
so it's from some older companies that closed, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Stockport and Luton are both the famous centres of hat making.
I think the interesting thing about that one.
But Luton particularly for.
How can we support this person?
So we'll I'll put all the information in there. One of the things I'm quite interested in is that it's possible that there are still people weaving the straw, and the Senate straw that you showed in the picture there, which is not only sold by Locke, is.
Well, I'll correct you there because Olney's.
Okay.
Locke will say they didn't get theirs.
Anyway,
They're bloody dead. They're bloody dead.
I know the people at Locke, they don't lie.
And I've got that very one, and it's quite a basic rough weave. And if you see some of the vintage ones, they've got very fine Senate weaves, and I think this young man might introduce some of those, because you can get the basic, you know, woven.
Yeah, I mean, the fact was that Olney just made so many of them, you could get them at a very reasonable price. They never actually retailed them. They always sold them to hat shops, and that's what killed them off, because all the shops were closed, and therefore they weren't getting any orders, and that's why they. I think the family are still hoping to get it going at some stage, but I'm not aware of the machinery. You know, you could well be right. They may have sold the machinery. I don't know.
But I think this chap's literally gone to old. There's people that had one or two blocks, presses with blocks, and there's still a couple of places that make what's the name of it? The molds. You know,
It's still quite a skill to make them. I mean, it's not something you can set up from scratch. I mean, it's not. I mean, to get a decent one, anyway, let's put it that.
I do think I have to point out at this point that here in the city we have the Worshipful Company of Felt Makers.
Yes.
Most of the skills you pointed out for the last 250 years, you'll have found that throughout history women are the main wearers of hats.
Oh, absolutely.
Most of those millinery designs and designs even of things Floras are developed for women's hats.
Yeah.
And currently I understand from the felt makers that the market for millinery and women's hats has increased by 40% in the last 3 years. So it's very much, and then when you're talking about the traditional way of weaving, of using blocks, that is very much being used and is actively being successful at the moment, but in terms rather of men's hats rather than women's. So the skills are still there.
Yeah.
And in fact, you might argue that the real source of excellence at the moment is not in the production of men's hats, it's in the production of millinery.
Well, absolutely.
Which is wonderful because it does preserve the skills required.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, the fedora and trilby were both women's hats. They were just adopted by men. But as I say, the fedora was most definitely a lady's hat when it first became fashionable. It's only been, you know, difficult to say, but gangsters sort of took it on as a.
Well, the boater's a very basic hat to produce, actually. It's a piece of simplicity to your average milliner.
Right.
So if the
But I think you still got to
demand-
have the right machinery to make it.
Well, the machines are there, but milliners have them.
Do they?
So I just wanted to, the feminist in me just wants to make sure.
Yeah.
that-
No, you're absolutely right. I mean,
in fact, I might suggest that some of you might want to look, if you ever want to have a hat made, there are quite a few of the people who are major women's milliners are extremely capable of making extremely good men's hats, often to a higher quality. I'm not talking about Bates or Locks here, I have a lot of time for them, but if you want a handmade men's hat that's a reproduction of something from the 18 or 1900s, I would suggest a milliner would be the way to go. They'd certainly be cheaper.
yeah.
Min's comment, what you kind of glossed over, you did say something about bowler hats being horse riding wear. What you didn't say was actually certainly when I was learning to ride horses, it was a real graduation when you were old enough to wear a bowler. That was men or women.
Right.
If you did dressage, you could wear a top hat. But a bowler, every riding teacher I ever had, and I've been riding since about 4 years old, wore a bowler, men or women. And it's kind of gone away now because of health and safety rules. That you have to wear crash cap.
Yeah, exactly.
But you kind of got to say with that. But it was a really important, and it's still worn by the hundreds.
Well, it was originally, as I said, it was created as a sort of the first sort of hard hat for. I mean, as you.
It's unisex in the sporting.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. But you know, it was, you know, first created for beaters and staff who worked on the estate who would wear it on a daily basis, who would be riding and getting their head, you know, top hats. I can imagine it cost them a lot of money to replace those top hats, so they wanted a hat that was perhaps cheaper to produce and was more practical, and therefore that was its original design. It just then morphed into becoming a city hat, but its original design was as a protective hat for horse riders and basically estate staff who had to encounter all sorts of ne'er-do-wells.
It's very much worn by women riders as well.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely
men
unisex
and
hat. Yeah,
it's
for that
very
purpose.
much
Yes,
worn,
yes.
You know, I would have loved to have been good enough to, or to have ridden for long enough to have had a bowler hat. You know, that would have been.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have
I think
been.
you should get one now.
I don't ride enough now. No, I haven't
You
ridden
don't
for a
need
long
to ride
time.
to get one.
I mean, I'm sure they would still be worn today, but for the fact so health and safety is
It's too small for me.
deemed that you've got to have a proper, you
Yeah.
know, like jockeys, they have a proper protective hat.
It's very difficult to be allowed to wear them now.
No, exactly,
It wouldn't be.
which is fair enough.
I've got a really serious question. Really serious
Right.
question. What's your favourite hat?
Ooh.
Yes.
I like the trilby in
Hands up for Trilby.
a traditional style or a Panama. I think the trilbies are very. If you're going to choose one hat,
I find the Stalhelm goes very well with a lot of suits.
Hands up for Stalhelm.
No, that's not here.
I mean, I'm not a fedora person. I have worn a fedora Panama this year, and I quite liked it. It's just a bit too flashy for me.
On the point of the Stahlhelm, after extensive testing in the late 1920s, it was adopted as the official helmet of the Irish Defence Forces, of the Irish Free State. And it was only dropped in the back end of the 30s when the emergency, as it's officially known in Ireland, started, and the Daily Mail ran a headline, "Helmets of 8," and tried to imply that the Irish had adopted it to spite the Brits because it was Hitler's helmet. But it was the M1916 pattern, you know, so it was very much pre-Nazi.
We might pinpoint a moment in history where the wearing of hat
ceased to be a daily requirement of men's fashion? 'Cause I'm sure,
I-
we all have photographs.
Well, unfortunately, I was
wearing a
around
hat.
during the period. I would date it to the mid to late 1960s.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
I think that's when men went bareheaded. I don't ever remember my father wearing a hat.
It's bizarre.
No,
Don't people
I-
keep their heads warm?
It's
My father
usually
wore hats in the
said,
70s.
yeah, it's usually said in the US that it was JFK's decision not.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was definitely, yeah, you're right.
But my grandfather in the city definitely wore a bowler hat into the 70s.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I will say yes. I mean, if you're talking specifically about the city, then I would say yes, that went into, I would say, the 70s, probably.
I've just seen one actually, one of the clerks leaving.
Well, my own father, who was an electrician, a working class Irishman in the 60s and 70s, I don't think I own a photograph of him where he's in a suit out and about and he isn't finished off with a hat. He's always wearing a trim.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, there's always exceptions. I mean, you know, I know what you mean. I mean, my grandfather was from a period where you wore, you know, he didn't wear a suit, but they would wear a suit on a Sunday if they were going to church, and they might well wear a hat. But I was around during the 60s, and I don't remember my father wearing a hat. As I say, James Bond, who was a very seminal figure and fashion icon, was wearing a trilby in those early Bond films. But I think, you know, I think that finished by, say, the late 60s.
Our next door neighbour, we moved to this house in 1967, and I always remember, as long as I remember, Mr. Gray wore a bowler hat to work. He wore a bowler hat, a carnation, he carried an umbrella. He was actually a manager of Clark's shoes in Romford, but he wore that. I discovered that when my mum took me there.
Was he
to have a look.
ex-military?
I don't know, but he always wore.
If he was
current Captain
Yeah.
Beaker.
I just remember that being shocked that all he worked in was the shoe shop. It was Clark's shoes. When my English grandmother lived near this shop, and I went there for my school shoes one time. And I think my parents were quite surprised to see that he was only he only worked in Romford Clark's shoes.
Keep up appearances.
It's a good shoe shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitively, I would say this, you know, the mid to late 60s, because the whole pop culture changed everything. I mean, to be seen wearing a hat, apart from, of course, if you worked in the city with a bowler hat or you were a civil servant, it was just regarded literally as old hat. People didn't stop wearing them. You know, it's hard to pick a time, but I would specifically say mid to late 60s.
Apart from Brixton in 1979 and 80, when everyone was wearing a pork pie hat.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. I mean, I could have mentioned pork pie hats. I mean, you know, there's always a hat that sort of takes on with the various culture, isn't there? I mean, you know, Frank Sinatra popularised wearing a pork pie hat, as you say. He was a cultural hat with West Indians, musicians and artists and everything else. So, I mean, but overall, if you're talking about the whole country, I would say mid to late 60s.
Essex, I remember when I was researching this, he took photographs
You've done a talk as well.
of the Great War. Great War era, different trades in the same factory would wear different hats, so that the more senior you were in terms of the trade, you wear a different hat to the flat counts, the factory floor workers. Just the skilled trades would wear something like that, and then there'd be another trade for them.
Yeah, and the World Wars always killed off hats. I mean, it killed off the top hat, it killed off boaters. You know, after each war, there's always a sort of social reaction, isn't there?
You see Lloyd George in a frock coat and with a top hat.
Yes.
What was the US president in 1990? Woodrow Wilson turns up at Versailles, top hat. So 1990 is probably the last hurrah.
Well, as we mentioned, I mean, Kennedy really.
Yes.
He was an iconic president. The fact that he turned.
Thanks very much, people. I think.
That's it. Well, there you